Hello and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Brianne Steffi. I own a sewing business called Steffi Stitch where I make and sell handmade bags, hats, aprons, and seasonal goods. And I also really love sharing sewing tutorials, DIYs, make with me's, and that's what I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to be making a sorting hat from Harry Potter, and I'm going to take you along as I try to figure out all that goes into it. And I started selling witch hats at craft fairs last year and really fell in love with it. So I'm thinking I can use the base of my pattern for these witch hats to turn it into a sorting hat. Obviously I have some tweaks to the shape and all the crinkles and all that goodness. I have this beautiful brown vinyl that was given to me and it's just screaming to be made into a sorting hat. I think it's the right color. If I do some shading and beat it up a little bit, we'll see if we can get there with this. So if you'd like to see how I figure out how to make this sorting hat and maybe learn how to make your own, make sure to keep watching. If you like videos like this and want to see more, make sure to subscribe. YouTube is my favorite part of all this. I love sharing how to make all the things, and I would really appreciate it if you'd follow me along. And yeah, let's get started. All right, welcome back to my messy workstation. I got the lining done and I was able to test out that pattern that I made, and there are definitely some things that need to be changed. It's holding up really nice and stiff, so I think this will be a good base. I'm gonna stick my fabric over there to just get a feel for this and kind of drape it on top. So I'm gonna fix this and then we'll work on the outside layer. So this is definitely a good height. The width will be good. And I'll just have to like mold. I know it looks like the mouth is kind of down there and he has a pretty good eyebrow. So my thought is to really just form it to see if I can hand stitch it together. I might have to glue it, to be honest. And I know there's like some folds here and like that. This will work, but I think I need to watch Harry Potter first. All right, it's time to work on my actual pattern because I'm starting to feel like this can actually work. And I'm super extra, and I really just use my first pattern to figure out the sizing for this next pattern, but I would recommend just buying a witch hat pattern online, or I'm sure there's probably free ones. If I can find some, I'll link them down below. But yeah, I was struggling through this part, so I don't really have a whole lot of advice on the math equations behind this because I was a solid 3 inches off my first try, and it took me about 6 different tries to get everything trued up nicely and to also get the right size. Once I did figure it out, I used some felt to make some mock-ups with the different sizes and really try them on and get a feel for them. So it was chaos, but I was able to get 3 different size patterns out of this. So one of these days I will learn how to digitize my patterns and I will link those down below. But until then, I will try to find a pattern that you can use. Really all you have to do is add 5 inches to the outside cone layer where you're going to be molding the face. And you'll see those pattern pieces in a minute, but here it is. My pattern is done. So before I get started cutting my actual fabric, I do want to practice my painting techniques and my molding techniques just so that I get a feel for how it's going to be done and I can move and groove through my final hat. And I did this by hot gluing the inside of the outside face layer, and I just pinched it in between my fingers and hot glued where the pinch was from the inside, if that makes any sense. Felt and made sure that the glue was nice and cooled off and set, and that worked really well. I just moved from the mouth up and I tried to glue the outside. It did not work at all. It didn't stick on this vinyl. So I might have to hand sew some areas. And then it's time to practice painting. I use this black acrylic leather paint, and I really just practiced the different concentrations. I went in really heavy in the shadows in the mouth and underneath the eyes, and I eventually practiced using some water mixed with the paint, and that worked really well to just give the whole hat an all over distressed look. I used my fingers, I used that sponge brush, but I felt like the paper towels worked really well because I was able to add a little bit of water, and it helped me to blend it out because that leather paint does dry pretty fast. Okay, it's time to cut our actual pattern. And you can see my pattern pieces here, just a big donut and two cone shapes. This one is my inside cone. I've got the 3 sizes marked. And then for the outside cone, I just added 5 inches on top. And then those bottom corners, I just drew the line from the bottom corner to the top point. And that is how I got my pattern. I traced everything out with permanent markers so I didn't poke any holes into the fabric. And before I take these pieces to the sewing machine to sew them up, I am going to add my first layer of distressing. That way I know that there is some paint in the creases, because I feel like it's probably going to be hard to get that paint in all of the seams and stuff like that. So I just added a little drop of that paint mixed with some water, mixed it up, and brushed it along all the pieces. I tried to add some more distressing around the edges and little spots where it's more heavy and spots where it's lighter. I just really am trying to make this look really dirty. I also had to figure out what to do for the ties before I took all this to the sewing machine. So I just ripped up some strips of black cotton and got this nice bronze screen printing ink. And I started out by hand painting some swirls, just because in the movie there are definitely some sort of designs and a gold shimmer on the ties. But the hand painting didn't look so great, so I got some of my Chalk Couture transfers and just messed around with a couple of little details. I went with this really subtle floral speckle, and I really just wanted to add just a little bit of golden shimmer. If I could find a beautiful silk fabric for this, that would be amazing, but this will do the job until I can find the right fabric for it. All right, all my pieces are prepped. It is time to sew this bad boy up. So I sew the lining as a unit and the outer fabric as a unit. And with the lining fabric, I did tuck in those ties where the brim meets the cone. Can kind of see how I'm pinning it together here. And I just tucked the ties into this seam and sewed all the way around. All that prep work was definitely worth it. This was a nice, easy sew. So I trimmed everything up, turned it right sides out, and now it's time to start molding and adding in those details. I really just did kind of a base mold. I folded it and tried to get a feel for where everything would land. And I did this so that I could figure out where to put my patch. I cut my patch out of some vinyl, just a sloppy rectangle. I distressed it with that leather paint. And then once it was nice and dry, I got some double-sided tape and stuck it where it needed to stick. And I used some embroidery floss to sew it on. Here's a close-up of that patch. I did smudge some paint a little bit, but that's okay because I'm really gonna distress it at the end. So now it's time to glue those face folds and molds in place. And I did this just like I did with my drafts. I used my lining as a mannequin for this and just went back and forth, trying to pinch it, taking it off, gluing it. I really tried to get that glue at the very edge or tip, I guess, of that fold on the inside, because that really just, it helped it to stay in place nicely and to not be too deep. Like I just wanted to add the detail, but kind of let the hat fold and mold into place itself. You know, I wanted it to look natural, if that makes sense. I mean, as natural as you could for something like this. But yeah, I had some issues with the eyebrow, I will say. It just was not curving down the way that I had hoped, which I think would help if I had added a little bit more to the outside cone. I know I mentioned adding about 5 inches to that outside layer, but in mine, I think it was only 3, but I think that extra inch or 2 will really help to get nice grooves into that face. The clips ended up being really helpful to keep everything in place while I was gluing things. And you'll see here, I did end up going in with some thread to reinforce that eyebrow and to make sure that it just fell down the way that I wanted it to. That is definitely a little bit better there. So just gonna finish up and finish the folds on the tip and we're good to go. Okay, this is where we're at so far. I'm trying to see what it looks like on camera. I promise in person, it's starting to take shape, but while I wait for the patches to dry, because I need to add more hand-sewn patches on the brim, I'm going to trim the brim a bit because it's just way too long. I'm going to trim it about 1 inch all the way around, and then after I hand sew the patches on, I'm going to go in and shade it a little bit more, make it darker in the mouth and around the eyes. And then after that dries, I think I'm ready to sew this bad boy together. So I'm going to sew it right sides facing, twist it out, and then we'll go from there because I'm still unsure how I'm going to finish this brim. So that's where I'm at right now. Yeah, I'll see you at the end. Hopefully I don't mess this up with paint because it's been a lot of work so far. All right, I got the patches on. I added a little gash too. You can kind of see, I'll show you in a minute, but it's time to sew it together. Things are right sides facing. I tucked the face into the lining, if you can see there. And I also left about a 6-inch gap so that I can easily flip this out. And you can see here I'm flipping things right side out, just double checking, making sure everything looks okay. And as I'm pushing those seams out to the very edge, I'm noticing that I do need to clip some corners into the seam so everything lays nicely. So I did that, added some triangles about every inch or so. If I did this again, I would do it probably every centimeter just to get that outside seam nice and smooth. And that's a little bit better. So I am just pushing all those seams out to the edge as much as I can and clipping them so that I can do a nice row of top stitching. I wasn't sure if I was going to add wire or not to the brim, but the vinyl is holding up really nicely. So I'm just going to sew it and I think this will be okay. And I'm just adding one line of top stitching about 1/8 of an inch from the edge here. And I do need to add some ties for around the brim. So I just took a really long strip of vinyl about 1 inch wide, folded it in half and sewed it together that way. And in a little bit, I will do the distressing and color it so it matches the rest of the hat. And finally, the last layers of distressing with that leather paint. I'm starting with the mouth and underneath the eyes and really trying to get those as dark as I can. And then I am just going through with a little bit of water mixed in with that paint and putting a couple layers around the rest of the hat, making it look a little bit more worn in. All right, my hat is done, and I definitely have some thoughts. First of all, I'm really happy with it. I think that with the materials that I just had on hand, I was able to get a pretty decent sorting hat. The materials definitely aren't very authentic, and stuff like that does kind of bother me a little bit, and I am kind of a perfectionist, so I focus on the things that need some improvements. But I think the shape and the techniques I did with the materials I had were pretty good. This lighting is not a good view for the hat. Since this is vinyl and since I did paint it with that leather ink, I'm getting a little bit of a reflection and it's distracting. You can't really see the true essence of this hat. So I'll post some videos of this in some candlelight, some nice warm light, and hopefully you get a better feel for what this hat actually looks like. But I wanted to show it on because it fits really nicely and it's pretty comfortable. So yeah, some things that I would change if and when I make another one, because I definitely can see myself making another one. I need leather. I don't know if my sewing machine can sew leather, but I need one of these in some suede or some leather. I was even thinking linen might be nice because you could fray it up a bit in some pieces and really make it look worn in. So yeah, if I was able to find some leather, I would definitely do another one. And also a nice piece of silk for the ties, some dark chocolatey brown, green silk with, it'd be awesome if I could find it with like a gold shimmer in there too. Fingers crossed that I come across a nice piece of leather to hopefully try this again. But if I were to make more of these with the stuff that I do have on hand, I would definitely, first of all, I'd add a little bit more volume right here so that I'm able to shape it more and really make the folds a lot deeper, because I feel like especially around the eyebrow it just needed to be a little bit more creased up. And I would also hold back on the shading a little bit. With that leather paint, I went in there hard because I can't distress this vinyl, otherwise it just peels off, so I wanted to do that with the paint. And I went in really heavy, and when I did that, I kind of lost some of the shadows in the mouth and the eyes, kind of just blended in a little bit more, and it looked better when it was more emphasized. So if I do another one, I'll go a little bit lighter on that. But yeah, that's really it. I am really happy I was able to get this idea out of my head and on top of my head. So yeah, you'll have to let me know down below, how did I do? I know this isn't a good view right now, but how did I do according to the B-roll I hopefully enter in here somewhere? And let me know in the comments what house you think you'd be in if you got sorted. My husband thinks I'm a Slytherin. I think I'm more a Hufflepuff, but when I take the quizzes online, it says I'm Ravenclaw, so I don't really freaking know. But yeah, let me know down below. If you like videos like this and want to see more, make sure to like and subscribe. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. Bye!